let the excitement and the build-up for UFC 311's main event between Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan, the highly anticipated rematch, let it begin, man, right? We're coming up on the new year here. This is going to be the first big pay-per-view event of the year. We have Merab versus Umar in the co-main event. It is an unbelievable pay-per-view to start the year. But I saw this interview last night between Islam Makhachev and Daniel Cormier that they did here on ESPN MMA. I'll go ahead and link this full interview down below. But guys, I wanted to pull some time codes, right? Some different things for us to take a look at and discuss, and I can kind of react to it, because I thought this was actually a very interesting interview with Islam. Because the one thing I really like about Makhachev is a lot of the things that I say about Dricus du Plessis, the things that I say about Bilal. I like champions that want to fight the hardest challenges in the division. And these are guys that consistently are willing to sign on the dotted line against that next best contender. And that is exactly what we are seeing here with Islam Makhachev. And he's going to discuss a number of things. He's going to recap a little bit of the Dustin Poirier fight. And what I actually thought was pretty interesting, he doesn't look at Arman as his toughest challenge that he has had in his career, because I know a lot of people, they like to point to that, right? They're like, oh, Arman Tsarukyan was his toughest challenge. Islam doesn't necessarily agree with that. And then we will also get to hear what his plans are moving forward, because Islam, he's in a very interesting position, right? He's had some defenses at 155 pounds. He's kind of getting close, to clearing out some of those top challengers. And he's kind of due, right? He's due for that opportunity to move up to 170 pounds to challenge for that double champ status. Having given Volk an opportunity twice to move up and fight him at 155 pounds. So to me, that's something that's definitely down the line for Makhachev. But let's waste no more time and hop right into this, starting with his thoughts on the Dustin Poirier fight, because again, that was a very hard fight against Dustin Poirier, and I feel like that night, Dustin was just wasn't going to be denied, right? There was a lot of talk, is this Dustin's last fight? So he kind of came out there with just almost leaving it all out there, right? Now, I know DP always goes out there and leaves it all out there, but there was definitely a different air when it came to Dustin Poirier in the title fight against Islam Makhachev.
Yeah. Honestly, Dustin improved his wrestling game a lot, because always you have the trouble with the wrestling fighters who have good skills, wrestling skills. That's why I think he did a good job in the camp. He improved his defense, and he gave me a hard time.
It was hard?
Yes, it was hard, but it's a very good fight for defense and big experience for me also.
Yeah. So look, right off the bat, and this is what I like about champions like Islam, right? I say the same things about Dricus du Plessis, because you guys have maybe seen my recent videos where these guys they're humble. They sit down, they have a little bit of an edge to them, right? To where they know how to kind of get people fired up, sell the fight a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's respect. And I like that he can give credit where it's due. Look, I feel like Islam coming to that, he knew he was facing a dialed-in Poirier. He knew he was going to be facing a very, very, motivated guy, considering it could be the last fight of his career. But he's right. Dustin did make a lot of improvements. So to hear him acknowledge those things, I always like when a champion is able to do that. But let's move ahead and kind of listen to him, because, listen, a guy like Islam, right? He trains with Khabib Nurmagomedov in the camp and all that they have going on there. There's high expectations when it comes to Islam. So let's kind of hear his thoughts on that, because every time people always think that these champions, right? I know we see a guy I know Chimaev's not a champion, but he's a guy who goes out there. He dominates Robert Whittaker. He goes and finds these finishes. People just think that you're supposed to go out there as a champion and always find a quick finish. It just doesn't always work out that way, right? When you're facing the best guys in the division, that isn't always going to happen. So I always like to hear from a champion, what their mindset is with this.
Because they expect I will smash or that's why we have a lot of talk about after the first fight against Volkanovski, and that fight, the last fight, I think everybody expect I smash Dustin, but this guy is a high level fighter. It's not easy to finish someone, But in the press conference we have good discuss. He say, I will make you sleep, I will knock you out. But I was told him, if you're not top, I will make you sleep, and I finish him in the last round. But he top and sleep.
So again, you got to hear it there. Look, and that's kind of what I've always said, right? Everyone always thinks we kind of get spoiled a little bit with a guy like an Alex Pineda who goes out there, he finds these finishes. it's not always like, obviously we all want to see people get finished. We want to see knockouts. We want to see submissions. But when you're in there against the best guys in the world, the most important thing is finding the victory while not necessarily putting yourself in a position, because when you lose the title, I mean, you're talking not only do you lose the belt, you got to find a way to get back to it, but that there's financial compensation that comes with being the champion. So, everyone always has these crazy expectations. I think Islam Makhachev handles it incredibly well. But let's move on here to where he's going to get into, talking about Arman Tsarukyan, because to me, this is very interesting because Arman Tsarukyan, he's a guy that's aligned himself for this opportunity, right? Yes, back in the day when, him and Islam were kind of new on the scene and it was kind of earlier on, that's looked at as a tough fight from both angles. But now, like I said before, when the news was announced, I made a video and I said, look, I like a rematch. Whenever we have guys, it's like, okay, they fought and then they fight a few months later, we do the rematch. Okay, yeah, that's exciting. But it's almost a little bit more intriguing to me when it's been a number of years. It's been this time that's went by to where they both have just been on pretty much an absolute tear, right? Islam goes on, wins a number of fights, becomes champion. Arman Tsarukyan goes out there, is steamrolling people, improving with every fight. I like that because now we have a little bit of a new story here to where it's like, man, Arman's made some improvements, man. Like, so I like that we kind of have this storyline coming in, but let's get Islam's thoughts on what Arman has been up to since the last time these guys met.
You guys fought the first time.
Of course, he improved. He have more experience, but same skills, He beat all this guy because they don't have wrestling. But when someone have good wrestling skills, he always have trouble with Gamrot, with me, and it's gonna be again. He have good wrestling skill, but if somebody defends, he have problem also.
So right away, you already know this, right? We've already known that this has kind of been the fight probably for a number of months now, right? Since Poirier, fought Islam Makhachev, we knew kind of how the stars were going to align, that it was going to be a little bit before we got the Arman versus Islam rematch. But it's we know Team Khabib and Islam, like they've been preparing for this, right? And they've had a close eye on Arman Tsarukyan over the past number of months here, right? And there's no question that Arman has made some improvements. And what I think is very interesting is when they talk about, they look at the Gamrot fight and it's like, yeah, Mateusz Gamrot, he's got a relentless style of pace, right? And a little bit of a different style of grappling, I would say, than a guy like Islam, right? And everyone always says Islam and Khabib, and they just want to compare those guys all the time. And I tell people, I'm like, look, they're both very skilled and they're both very different, right? Khabib had this forward pressure heavy style to where he tried to, just get in your face, eat a couple shots if he had to, just to get a hold of you, to take you down and maul you, to where Islam, he's more comfortable on the feet, right? He's got good kicks, he's got some good striking, and he can chase the takedowns, but it's quite a bit different than that super aggressive style than like a Khabib or, Mateusz Gamrot is absolutely relentless with the takedown. So I'm going to be curious to see how Islam approaches Arman moving forward as we get closer, and then we get in there for the fight, because like I said, different styles stylistically. But let's hear what he says about, underestimating Arman the first time around. So I always think that that's interesting to get the champ's insight on stuff like this.
It was one of the hardest fight, of course, but it's not like toughest fight, because the 5th round with Volkanovski, it was crazy. It was hard rate, more than 200 it's called, But maybe I was underestimating because he's
Short notice.
Nobody know him, and he don't have name, And I never watch his fight, and he did well in that fight. But I like to finish the all questions, When I have with Volkanovski the fight, I told everybody I have to finish the questions and finish, That's why the second fight, I will be looking for the finish and make everybody shut up.
So there, make everybody shut up. So look, he basically looks at Alexander Volkanovski as kind of that 5-round fight that he had with him in Australia as basically like, look, that was my toughest challenge, right? And Arman Tsarukyan, there's no question, right? It was a competitive, fight, even though Islam clearly won the fight. It was still, and we saw Islam pushed in ways that we necessarily didn't see in other fights, which is usually he's just like almost one-sided, domination, right? In a lot of his fights, right? I know the Poirier fight was a good back and forth. It was exciting, but usually the Islam matchups, they're him just kind of dominating. To where Arman, we saw a little bit of resistance. So I think that that's what people are hanging on to. But I find that interesting, right? To hear him say, look, I underestimated him coming into that. And I think that that is something that is very important to note coming into this, because I do think both guys have made a tremendous amount of improvements since the first fight, with each other. But let's move on here to get his thoughts on the Arman fight, this time around. Because like I said, whenever you're going to fight somebody, a few years later, it's going to be a different fight, right? It's been a few years. We've seen some improvements. You kind of mature, you kind of grow up in the UFC, you get more experience under your belt. And I think that we've seen that from both guys. So let's hear what's different this time around from Islam and the way that he sees this fight.
Same things. I don't know his.
I think he took you down.
He took me
like
down
3 times.
No, 1 time, man.
Bro, DC doesn't watch these fights, man. I don't think he watches these fights. Sometimes he's throwing stuff out there. I don't know if he's messing with Islam, but dude, there's like so many times that DC throws stuff out there. I'm like, dog, do you even watch the sport? Do you even watch the fights?
No. Watch the fight. You never watch my fight.
I watch your fights all the time.
Okay, watch. 3 times, nobody, bro. Even you, Nick, you cannot take me down 3 times, bro.
Take me down many times.
No, it's not true. The first fight, and I don't know his background, He defends my wrestling. He give me just, he's tough. That's why he give me hard time. But now I know everything what he can do.
So you think you'll finish it?
I think yes.
Now, this is interesting, right? Because you hear Islam say, I think I'm going to get a finish here. And I'm picking Islam to win this fight. I do think that he is able to find a finish this time around, because I think he will approach the rematch differently than he did in the first fight. I 100% believe that. But one thing I do want to point out, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that grappling match between Arman Tsarukyan and Khamzat Chimaev. Now, listen, I know Khamzat is much bigger than Arman Tsarukyan, and Khamzat is a freak athlete, especially when it comes to the grappling. But the speed of Chimaev was very noticeable out there against Arman. But the thing that was impressive to me about Arman, because usually the smaller guy tends to be a little bit quicker, even though Chimaev was a lot quicker, the submission defense from Arman against Khamzat in that I thought was really impressive. And we've seen that from Arman in his career. Even if he is having some issues in the grappling, he has really good submission defense. You saw that against Charles Oliveira. He was able to defend against the submissions very well. So you cannot sleep on the submission defense of Arman, because even if he's getting out grappled, he still stays relatively safe defensively, which I think is very impressive.
Charles, every round almost finish him. Do some guillotine, do some triangle choke, like everything very close. But I think I have more chance.
So Islam, I think he can find a finish in this fight. But listen, the fact that they're recognizing that you can see, I'm one of those people, I kind of read into it a little bit. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it sounds to me like they've really been sitting down doing their homework on Arman. They looked at that Gamrot fight. They watched the Oliveira fight back, and they're like, we see some things here, right? Because you see Gamrot controlling him a little bit in the grappling and having some success. And then we see Charles Oliveira, right? Whenever Arman decided to engage into the wrestling, okay, here's some of the windows of opportunity, some of these submissions that we could be looking for. So again, Islam's a hard guy to take down, right? So if Arman's going to come in with this grapple-heavy game plan, I'm just very interested to see how that plays out without question. But I'm going to move on here to 7-19. And again, this is what I've said about guys like Islam, guys like Dricus du Plessis, champions in specific, because what we've seen kind of this kind of, I don't want to say it started with Sean O'Malley, but he wins the title, right? He's a guy, they make Aljo turn around on a quick notice to end up fighting Sean O'Malley. We all know what that was about. That was all about getting Sean O'Malley the title. And then they're like, look, we're not going to have you fight the number one guy, Merab Dvalishvili, who should be fighting next. We're going to basically toss you a layup, a good stylistic matchup for essentially a free title defense. We saw the UFC do it with Alex Pineda, right? They throw him in there with Khalil Roundtree when it should have been Ankalaev, right? We've seen the UFC do this. They try to find a way to take these stars, and specifically the guys that are known for their striking, and give them guys that are going to stand in front of them that can help, elevate them and make that, allow you to put on a fun performance. So from the business angle, that's clearly what the UFC is doing. but I think that this is interesting. Whenever you get these champions that are like, I want to fight the top guy, that's what you're going to hear Islam talk about here.
Let's a little bit talk about Arman. Honestly, I told all my fight career I want to fight with a real contender or with a real fighter who deserves the title fight, with the tough guy, That's why I think he's deserved, and it's gonna be a huge fight for the fans because he have all skills. He's all skills. He good in the striking. He good in the wrestling, grappling. That's why it's gonna be two high-level fighter fights.
Dude, and I love an answer like that because again, what we've seen from some of the champions, they're not necessarily always fighting the next best guy. And I know the sport has changed and there's been some different things going on, but I always like when we get that next dangerous contender in line, right? So like what we saw Merab go up against Sean O'Malley, when we got, this Arman Tsarukyan, who has history with Islam Makhachev. Arman has looked unstoppable. He's made all these improvements. It creates that intrigue to where it's like, okay, like it almost gives you goosebumps when the fight starts. That's when I get the goosebumps, when it's like, this is a real contender fight here. This isn't some layup or a great stylistic matchup. This is like, okay, this is a hard stylistic fight for both guys, the champ and the contender. That's what, to me, gives me those goosebumps and has me on the edge of my seat because it's like, both guys are so good. Like, what's going to happen here? So I love when the UFC puts fights like this together. But I wanted to move ahead here to 756 to where he talks about when, Alexander Volkanovski came back from an early KO. He's going to talk about Dariush going in there against Arman Tsarukyan. Interesting to hear a perspective from a high-level fighter like Islam on when you get KO'd, because Islam has been KO'd in his career, right? So it's not like he's someone who's just kind of like talking like, oh yeah, here's what, my thoughts are. It's like he's experienced this, right? So to have that, it's not great to be KO'd, right? I'm not knocking him. I'm just saying he's been in this position to where you got to take some time and kind of, find yourself. Like in boxing, the old heads will say, you got to take some time away, right? Get your wits about you again, and then get back in there when you are fully confident. Don't go back in there trying to prove a point necessarily. So I love hearing this stuff from a guy like Islam.
Dariush, he just came back shortly from when Oliveira beat him, smash him, knock him out. And some of the fighters did mistake, like what Volkanovski did with Tapuria. Somebody knocked them out, and they want to go back soon and show people it's nothing. I don't feel nothing after the knockout. And what Arman did with Dariush, what Tapuria did with Volkanovski, they just rushed a little bit, did mistake.
So so to hear that, right? I feel like as fans, a lot of us, we were like, Volkanovski's rushing back too soon, right? He got KO'd by Islam, and he's like, I'm going to rush back and take on one of the most dangerous featherweights that we've ever seen. I mean, I was saying it since the minute he bursted onto the UFC scene. I'm like, Topuria is a real problem, right? He's going to be a serious issue for Volkanovski. I'd like to see Volk take a little bit of time, right? And then Dariush goes out there, gets KO'd by Oliveira, then comes in against another dangerous guy in Arman Tsarukyan and gets absolutely demolished. So to see guys come back so soon from KOs, to me, that's a little bit of how you can, reinvent your career, is not coming back too soon, because when you do that, I feel like it just sends fighters on a little bit of a downturn, and it is to where if they took a little bit of time, they could maybe preserve themselves a little bit more instead of rushing back so soon. And last but not least, let's hear what Islam says in terms of what is next for him, because that's going to be the big question, right? When he's out here, he's defended the title numerous times. Charles Oliveira just went out there, beat Michael Chandler. What does the champ want to do next? Let's hear what he has to say.
I don't know. If I looking behind Arman, if I beat him, I don't know. I'm tired to give somebody rematch, I need the second belt below there. We'll see. A lot of good fighters.
Charles Oliveira has shown, right, again, that he's right back in the mix.
Man, I beat him. Arman beat him.
We've heard champions talk about this, right? And people just go after Islam because they don't like Islam. It's like, dude, rematches in a way, like, especially when you finish the guy and it's not exactly the most competitive fight, what's the point really doing a rematch? Like, I think that's what he's looking at. Like, why am I going to rematch Oliveira? I destroyed him. Because he did. He destroyed Charles Oliveira. What's Oliveira going to do different? There's a gap in the wrestling. And on the strike, on the feet, Islam has good striking to where he can hurt Charles. He's not afraid to go to the ground with him. That's kind of the asterisk when you fight Charles. A lot of these other guys, they can hurt him on the feet, but are afraid to go to the ground with him. What's Charles do different? I know he's made improvements, but I feel like he's just like, well, come on. I've gave Volkanovski 2 chances to fight me for double champ status. What am I going to do a rematch for? I want to go up to 170 for a double belt. So I completely get it.
It's nothing excited, to beat him again. But if he want, if Dana want, if friends want, why not?
Yeah.
Again, I can beat him.
Again, why I like champions like Islam. They go out there and they're like, look, the UFC is going to say this. The fans are going to say this. I, at the end of the day, want to do what's best for my career. And I also want to do what do people want to see me do, right? They say that this is the next toughest challenge. Give me Arman Tsarukyan. Give me the rematch. You thought the first fight was close? Watch this. I'm going to show you. I'm levels above this guy. I underestimated him. Give me that opportunity to show you that I am much better than him. So I always love when we get a guy like this who's willing to put it all on the line, who's willing to do what the fans want to see, what the organization wants to see. That's very exciting to me. And like I said before, we have some big stars. Like Islam is a big star. Hamzat Chimaev is a big star. Alex Pineda is a big star. We have some big stars in the UFC, but it's a lot more spread out, I think, than what it used to be, right? We had like the mega stars where it's like we have Diaz, Masvidal when he was on that run, Conor McGregor, and John Jones. And now it's like it's more spread out to me, which makes it more fun. But most importantly, we have champions like I've said, like Bilal, DDP, Islam, guys that want to fight the next best contender. They're not like, I want to avoid this guy and get a layup. That's what I'm so excited. That's what makes me so excited in terms of where the UFC is at right now. But let me know what you guys thought of this, right? I'm super excited for UFC 311, first big event of the year. I mean, this main event, it's going to be absolutely spectacular. The co-main event is going to be awesome between Umar and Merab. Let me know your guys' thoughts on all of this. Who do you think wins the rematch? Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.